reasons. Most of the remainder have suggested an earlier century on the strength of a different technological reason, and just a handful of individuals have mentioned a non-technological event prior to 1900, such as the Renaissance, or the campaign for the rights of women. As far as I remember, no one has ever suggested a century before 1000, even though one could make a good case for the 5th, which saw the collapse of the western half of the Roman Empire. Some people reply by asking a question of their own. What do you mean by change? On the face of it, it is an obvious response, but it is also a curious one. Everyone knows what change is, an alteration of state. Yet, when asked to identify the century that saw the greatest change, people seem to lose their grasp of the meaning of the word. The collective human experience over a long period of time is just too huge in scope for us to think of the myriad changes it incorporates. Taken together, all the different factors are unmeasurable. We can calculate certain specific changes across the centuries: life expectancy at birth, reproductive rates, longevity, height, per capita calorific intake, labourers' average wages, and for a large proportion of the last 1,000 years, we can measure such things as church attendance, levels of violence, relative wealth and literacy. But to measure any one of these things accurately, we have to isolate it from all the other aspects of our lives. We cannot measure differences in ways of living. It is like measuring love. Actually, it is considerably more difficult than measuring love. At least love can be related to a scale, say from considering sending a Valentine's Day card to launching 1,000 ships to win back your loved one. Lifestyles cannot be related to a scale. Any quantifiable change that might be considered the most significant can be countered by another quantifiable change. For example, the 20th century certainly saw the greatest growth in expectancy of life at birth. It increased by more than 60% in most European countries. But against this, it could be held that individual men and women had much the same potential lifespan in previous centuries. Even in the Middle Ages, some men and women lived to 90 years of age or more. St. Gilbert of Sempringham died in 1189 at the age of 106. Sir John de Sully died in 1387 at 105. Very few people today live any longer than that. True, there were comparatively few octogenarians in the Middle Ages. 50% of babies did not even reach adulthood. But in terms of the maximum lifespan possible, there was little change across the whole millennium. As soon as people try to find a measurable fact with which to answer the greatest change question, other measurable facts get in the way. Why select one rather than another? As the example of life expectancy as opposed to life potential shows, it is purely a matter of personal preference. This might suggest that the question is nothing more than a parlour game, a matter of curiosity and amusing debate, along the lines of who was the greatest king of England. But actually, it is a serious matter. As I have tried to show in my Time Traveller's Guides, understanding human society in different periods of time gives us a more profound view of the nature of mankind than the relatively superficial impressions we get by looking at the way we live today. History helps us to see the full range of our capabilities and inabilities as a species. It is not just a nostalgic look back on the way things were. You cannot get the present in perspective without looking at the past. It is only through looking back to the 14th century, for example, that we can see how resilient we are in the face of adversities as cataclysmic as the Black Death. It is only through looking back to events such as the Second World War that we can see how innovative, highly organized, and productive we can be when faced with a massive crisis. Similarly, looking at the history of Western governments over the last 100 years teaches us how myopic and short-termist we are in today's Western democracies, in which politicians pander to the whims of society and seek instant solutions to our problems.